Welcome again to the Main Points podcast. Today we have President Cris Valdez with us. He is the president of Richland Community College and has served in that role for going on 8 years, 9 years?
Just finished my eighth year this summer.
Well, all right, congratulations. Thank you for coming on the show and spending some time with us today. We'd love to dive into some of your history, some of your heart, and some of the innovation that you've been bringing to the education in the city. So how about we start with when you came to Decatur?
Sure. Our family has been in Decatur now since the summer of 2016. I was in a presidency across the country in Wyoming and looking for a new place to be and a new institution to lead. And there were several opportunities, and Decatur and specifically Richland Community College became pretty evident that it would be a good fit for me and that Decatur would be a good fit for our family.
All right. Well, share with us a little bit about your background. Where are you from?
Sure, that's a long story, but I'll try to keep it short for the interview, right? Both my wife and I were born and raised in Montana, a small little mining town called Anaconda, Montana, probably about 10,000 people. Lived there until I was an adult. Went to first technical school and then university, and began kind of a career in service.
So can you give us a bit of context with your childhood? Where and how did you grow up, and give us a glimpse of what that looked like for you?
Sure. I was born into a large family, but also what we would call a blended family. I don't think I knew that. I don't know if my siblings knew that, but I'm the youngest of seven. And actually, my siblings' father passed when my next oldest sibling was almost 2 years old. My mother moved from North Dakota, where they lived, to Anaconda, met my father, and I was born, so I'm the youngest of seven. And I would say we probably had, well, as a child, I think I had the best life in the world. But when you begin to look at those circumstances, they're probably not maybe the typical family as you would see. We lived in poverty. My father and mother divorced when I was probably less than two. Was raised by my mother for the rest of my growing years almost. And probably, I guess what I didn't realize, but I did know, we lived in a lot of places. So, when I look back, I probably easily, within Anaconda, because we moved outside of town and outside of the state a couple times, probably lived in 40 different places. And there was nothing unique for me as a child about that. But then when I look back, I realized those moves were primarily because we lived in poverty. And we didn't always have enough money for rent or enough money for food or enough money for clothes, but primarily rent is the reason why we lived, I like to say, just about on every street in Anaconda. So, the interesting thing for me, though, Cassie, is that was all normal. When you're a child, your life is how everyone else lives. It's not till later when you begin to reflect on that or you interact with other individuals that you come to understand that the way you grew up wasn't necessarily how everyone else grows up, or how you imagine people grow up, or how you see on TV what families look like.
So within that time frame of moving, were you in and out of different schools at those times too?
Oh, absolutely. Anaconda wasn't a large city, but there were probably 5 elementary schools. I think I attended 4 of them by third grade. In third grade, we moved to a smaller town, and I attended the end of third grade through 6th grade. It's probably the longest I was ever in one school. So.
Okay. Wow. You are right. I love how gracefully you always explain your norm and other people's norms.
Right.
That was something that always jumped out at me whenever I would talk to you. You had such a compassionate way of seeing things around understanding if people don't know any better, any different, and being able to see them in those places.
Yeah. Well, and I do think, at least for me, that comes from having experiences that were different than other folks, and not just assuming that we all grew up the same, that we all think alike, that we all had the same experiences, the same privileges, or the same challenges, and understanding that maybe not two people do have the same challenges. Because even within my experience growing up was different than my siblings, and probably easier than my siblings, though I think there were a number of challenges, but still it was a different experience, that I had than other folks, even in my family.
Right, right. So I'd love for you to fast forward a bit and explain to us around the time your mom stepped away and you moving in with your brother and some of what that looked like for you.
Sure. Well, and that'd be experience not many people would talk about, right?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't their lived experience. I think even as I became a young adolescent, I understood that we didn't have the same resources, economic or other, that many people around me had, and because I knew my mom was constantly looking for work, and I don't blame my mother for that. She lived with three men who were not very kind to her. She had a permanent disability, and she was a single mother in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But I do recall when I was in second grade, there was just no work to be had in our hometown, and my mom announced that we would move. And at the time, it was me and my three next older siblings. We would move to a little town, Arlee, which actually was on the Flathead Reservation, was a enlightening experience to live on the reservation as well. But again, when you're a young child, everything's fun. I mean, we got to go fishing and swimming and those kind of things. But it was really different. And one of probably the first times that I, looking back, understood about the term I call otherness. It's like I just wasn't the same. Our family wasn't the same as other people that we lived by, engaged with, those kind of things. And I think that's what kind of gave me a appreciation for empathy, if you will, about other people's experiences. So we lived in Arlee probably less than a year. I think we probably went there around the start of the school year, left at the end of the school year, went back to Anaconda. And then to your question, when I was probably 13, economic circumstances were very similar. My mom said, "Hey, I can't find a job. We need to move." When we moved to Arlee, it was to be near family for support and help us to find, or not us, but my mother to find employment. And when I was 13, she said, we have to do this again. And we were going to move to Colorado. And I don't know what happened exactly, but my brother, who was probably 16 at the time, he and I were really the only ones in the home, said, "I'm not moving." And I said the same thing. I don't know what compelled me to say that, but probably because I felt like I belonged in Anaconda most of my life, even if it was in multiple homes, existed in Anaconda. And probably one of the most difficult decisions I think my mom made, she said, "Okay." And we began living with my brother, who was probably just out of the home himself, 18 and a half, maybe 19 years old. But I think the remarkable thing about that for me, because again, people have different understandings of what life is, because people might say it was remarkable that you didn't live with your parents at the age of 13. That wasn't for me. What was remarkable was that for all that my mom did and all she cared about us, she never really parented me again. And I began raising myself primarily from age 13. So
there's you and your two older brothers then.
Correct.
That lived all in the same home. What was that like growing up with your brothers and some of the friends and people coming around there?
Well, I'll tell you, for me, it was fantastic because we had all the freedom in the world. Really, our caretaker, my brother Cody, who was 19, worked a state away as a oil rig roughneck. And so he would leave Sunday afternoon to drive 6 or 8 hours to get to his work site and return after midnight on Friday. So essentially, me as a 13-year-old and my brother as a 16-year-old, we did what we wanted. But be fair, we survived.
Yeah.
We thought we had a pretty good life, drove around in the car, did whatever we want, ate where we wanted, within our means. But he was parenting me and I was parenting him.
Yeah. I love how you say it just, you survived. And I think whenever we're able to see people in situations, understanding what their norm might be, looking at them with compassion and understanding those things a bit differently, we'll understand that a lot of people's, I think, behavior and what they grow accustomed to and what they have to do might look different than what we have to do, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think one of the things, and sorry, I'm trying not to jump around, but this was significant for me today. Last week I attended a professional development conference in the state of Washington and attended this conference primarily about community college presidents and community college president compensation and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And the speaker, who I serve on a number of different committees with, said this. He said, it's interesting because when people look at specifically community college presidents, they think, hey, here's someone who has a lot of resources, high wage, and really, kind of have things figured out. But he said, if you look at primarily community college presidents, not necessarily in other sectors, universities and so forth, or corporation presidents, they don't come from wealth. They don't come from generational privilege. They come from very modest backgrounds. And because your question, that's what came to me, because people look at me and think, hey, this guy lives in a big house, he has all these kind of things. And there are times, not many, because those wane over time too, that, I wanted to say in the past, like, hey, you don't know.
Yeah.
Because when I was in, 4th grade and had to wear PJs to school because we didn't have any other clothes and, there was no food in the pantry or in the cupboard, that was a different existence for me than what you see of me today. And it helps me to understand, regardless of how people's life you perceive it to be, you may not be accurate.
Oh, absolutely. I would love for you to share, kind of help bridge the gap for us of talking about your childhood and where these things are. I think when we had discussed before, there was a couple pivotal moments, I would call moments of grace,
Sure.
And we had a good smile about that, that you had love and compassion shown to you that I think helped get you through it and into a place of healthiness in a different way. If you don't mind, I'd love for you to share the story about your brother with the truck.
Well, I'll take a step or two back from that, because I spent a lot of time being angry at my mother. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about grace, that was probably one of the best things she did for me, to sacrifice, saying, no, you stay here. Because I think she knew how difficult it was for me to leave. So, and we'll talk about the experience with Cody, but it took me years and years to realize that was probably a bigger sacrifice and a larger gift to me than I would ever imagine. Yeah. And certainly than I could appreciate for probably 20 plus years. And then secondly, it occurs to me, my brother was 19. He had a good job, making a lot of money. He didn't need to take in to, street rats and try to mold them into something more than we were at the time.
Yeah.
But the question that you asked about Cassie, and let me preface it by saying this too, because I often see people who become emotional about something and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be emotional." And probably 20 years ago, I stopped doing that because the heart of who you are is sometimes in your emotion. And if you're not able to reveal that, then you're really not willing to reveal who you are to others. So a long time ago, I apologized for becoming emotional because, as you said, referring to sliding glass doors, this was a window into a new life for me. And for me not to be have some special feelings about that would be, pretty insensitive. Regardless, no apologies if I'm emotional. But not long after the three of us were in this arrangement, as I said, Cody is often not home. He was often not in the state. And we went to a small little convenience store, Osco. I think there's still Osco drugs around. And my brother, Fred, who was 3 years older than I, his friend Woody, and I don't know what the heck we were doing, probably wasting time. And I recall vividly, I probably had $2 in my pocket, which was a lot of money in, what would that be, like 1978 or 79. And even though I had money in my pocket, I grabbed some candy, I think, and put it in my pocket because that seemed easier than paying for it. Obviously, in that, someone caught me doing that, took me to the manager. The manager found my brother, Fred, who literally wanted to beat the crap out of me because I think mostly he was embarrassed. But he didn't because there was a lot of folks there, and he brought me home, and my brother Cody was there, and I remember Fred telling Cody what happened and getting ready for Cody to literally beat the crap out of me. And he called me in and said, "Hey, well, let's go for a ride." Yeah, that makes sense because he had wasn't a brand new truck, but a new truck to him was like a 1976 Ford short bed truck, 4-speed, large V8 engine. It was like his pride and joy. And so we go out into the driveway, and I go to get in the passenger side, and he said, "No, you get in the other side." I was 13 and a half.
You're expecting him to really come down on you hard, right?
Right. And he didn't say anything, but you get in there and drive. And we drove for, I don't know, probably not that long, but to me seemed like hours. And I kept waiting for him to, lash into me, both verbally and physically. And he never did. We never talked about Osco drug. We didn't really talk about anything. We came home and parked, and I went in my room, and I realized, even at that time, but it's become clear as I've matured and reflected on life, that I think that was Cody's way of telling me he loved me. Because, well, I was the youngest. I got the crap beat out of me all the time, mostly for fun from my brothers, because it was something for them to do. But it really was, in my mind, him saying, I don't know what the hell to do with you, but I'm not going to hurt you. I want to just tell you I love you. And being a young 19-year-old, I don't think he could say that either. But it was really my first, that I recall, remembrance of just unconditional love. Because
What
he
did
could have
that
done a lot of
do?
worse things to me.
What did that do for you at the age of 13 to get that response from him? Do you think you were able to feel it, maybe just not articulate it at that time?
Yeah, you know, it's an interesting question because at 13, you know, I wasn't having these type of thoughts that I'll share with you now. Because probably as 13, I thought, whew, got lucky, you know,
Yeah.
what can I do next time? But as I continue to reflect on it, I just, you know, I could feel that is how you treat people, right? You love people. You know, I grew up, as I said, lived in multiple homes, multiple apartments, trailer homes. You know, we'd come home after school and the bags, our house would be packed and we'd move the next day. There weren't a whole lot of resources for us. We didn't spend a whole lot of time watching movies around the TV or going on vacations and so forth. We really survived. And it was one of the first kind of gifts I remember receiving, right? I mean, everyone gets presents at Christmas and birthdays and so forth, but it was one of the first real gifts that I realized that my family gave to me. Part of that because, you know, when you're a teenager or young, you're pretty selfish and self-centered, but really did shape kind of how I tried to see other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's amazing. Moments of grace where there should be punishment, I think, is always transformative, right?
Right. Well, I think where you expect there to be punishment, right? It doesn't mean there has to be, but that's the expectation.
That is
right.
a great way of kind of splitting that hair there. That's
Right.
awesome. There was one more story I wanted to tag on because I felt like it was such a pivotal, another grace moment for you in a way. You had shared around a probation officer that had worked with you on some things.
Yes.
If you don't mind sharing,
No, I don't mind.
Just brief to get into some of the stuff, but I think that there's a bridge of a connection there for us.
Yeah. So yeah, you know, from 13 on until adulthood, there were times when I lived with my mom again. She moved back from Colorado, but really I parented myself. But when you're parenting yourself at that age, you don't always make the best decisions. Hung around with kids that probably weren't the best kids. I was probably 15 at the time, and we were having some crazy times, doing some stupid stuff, and got caught doing that. And two things that were edged in my mind that helped me to understand again about grace was, I think the court system and in particular the youth probation officer and, you know, the county understood that I was probably more of a follower than a leader, but beyond that, understood that there was probably some ability to, for lack of a better term, salvage me as a young man. You know, there was a lot of counsel to say, hey, you really probably shouldn't hang out with those other kids, most of them whom were older than I, and probably meted out a less severe kind of penalty. I went on youth probation for 6 months, kind of, hey, if you keep your nose clean, you'll finish that and kind of go on. And it was just those kind of things that helped me understand that beyond my family, that people could care about me. Try not to sensationalize this, but when you live in poverty, when you have few to no resources, you don't get to see those same gifts. I mean, your gift is, you know, we had dinner on the table for the whole week. And so it helped me to understand there were people beyond my immediate family or extended family that actually cared about someone. And hell, it didn't even have to be me, but to see that people cared, because there wasn't a lot of that growing up in my life. And so, you know, having that experience really helped me to understand I wanted to go into career. I didn't know if I understood it as a career at the time, but a career that I served other folks because I saw people serving me and caring about me, because I could have easily went down the same path and be in jail or prison or dead, had not, someone intervened and said, hey, there's another pathway for you than that.
Yeah. So do you think that influenced, because if I remember correctly, you began your education, your career in social work. Is that correct?
I did. Well, and my intent, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, go
My
ahead.
intent was to become a youth probation officer because that was, that was my astronaut, right? That was my NBA player. That was what I wanted to be.
Do you think it was because of what you saw with people caring and wanting to replicate that?
Yes, in large part, Cassie, but also because I'd seen so little of that in my life. I really had. When you're standing in the welfare cheese line or the food stamp line, you don't feel a lot of grace.
Yeah.
You feel a lot of people staring at you and judging your mother who, did everything she could to keep me from being on the streets or being in the penal system or something like that.
Yeah.
So just having that experience and that being so kind of unique inspired me.
So going into social work and starting there, how did it begin to shift into education of where we are?
Well, I would like to say it was a grand plan and I had this 30-year plan, but actually my wife and I moved from Montana for me to enter into graduate school, and for her, because I was a social worker at the time, me to move into graduate school and her to start her undergraduate degree. We got married, got pregnant, and determined that we probably should live on campus so we could take advantage of married student housing, daycare, those kind of things. So in my graduate work, I looked for programs that I could do on campus. I had to complete 2 internships. So the first one was in a TRIO program. TRIO is a federally funded program that helps students who are either low income, first generation, or minority status, or all of the above. So that really the serendipity of having to be on a close to campus so that we could raise our son really led me again to a helping field, to a place of service, and to a place where I was working with folks who probably also shared some of that otherness and had similar backgrounds and lived experiences as I did. My second internship was in a counseling center, which really was fairly similar to the work that I think the probation officer that I mentioned as a youth engaged with me, and just helping young people find their path, understand some challenges, and really kind of led me to education. It wasn't necessarily purposeful. It was more coincidental.
Okay. I love how it wasn't intended, but all the pieces fit together, it seems like, right?
Yeah, I think so. I haven't, when you say that, it makes me ponder that more because it just happened. As you talk about the sliding doors, they just continue to open and provide you, or provide me with those opportunities. And so it's hard to understand, is it like that really what I wanted, or those were the experiences that came to me, so I came to love them. And I think it's both, but I think it's more the former than the latter. The way I was raised, my life experiences, those opportunities to meet people who cared about you and wanted you to feel like you, in that space was like you were human, much less belong. They were inspiring to me.
And I'm sure healing in a lot of ways, I
I suspect so. Yeah. I hadn't thought about those terms, yeah.
So fast forward a little bit, because I would love to get into some of the more innovative work is the way that I would put that Richland is tapping into with education. It seems like to me, and this is my interpretation, and please elaborate on it, but I feel like what you guys are trying to do and what you guys are accomplishing is bringing in the background of the social work and the trauma-informed and kind of making this approach to education as a holistic approach into an individual and creating pathways for that.
Well, I think you're correct. Not that I think you're correct. You're correct. Part of those dynamics too are that higher education in general, just has changed. The populations that we work with have, I don't know if they've changed, but there's more openness to saying, hey, I'm not perfect, or I have challenges, or I need a service. Even when I grew up, you didn't talk about those kind of things. You just pulled up your bootstraps, whatever you had to do, and you just did your work. And I think for years, people, especially males, just didn't ever talk about those kind of things. And I think this generation, that's more open. I think another contributing factor is that education and the way we deliver education is changing. But for me, it was understanding one of the things that I didn't say before. When I moved into higher education, I began to move up the chain and learned that even though I had a master's degree, if I really wanted to move up into leadership, I had to get complete a doctoral program, and did that. And as I continued to grow in education, I realized, well, I first felt like, I don't know if I'm equipped to do this. I'm a social worker. These folks are educators.
Yeah.
But then I realized, one of the common themes about that is relationships, trust, building relationships in which we understand and empathize with others to help them define, whatever their future goals are, whether they're related to education, to career, or just self-efficacy. And they all go together. I mean, you can't separate that. So when you talk about dealing with the whole person, I think maybe education tried to do that before, but it's impossible. We become better students as we are able to better reconcile and be successful in our home lives. We become better leaders when we're able to have that balance and confidence in our family lives, all those kind of things. You just can't separate those things. And I think in the past we've tried to do that, but here we thought, this is really important. And you mentioned, the trauma-informed practices, and we began that in 2017. But I remember even before we established Enrich, we had advisors on campus, and for lack of better terms, we blew up advisors. We had probably 13 positions that we just eliminated, and we developed coaches. And people would say, well, that's not a big deal. It's just a change in names. But really, when we started coaches, we said we're going to deal with the entire person, the whole person. It's not just about, do you want to take algebra or statistics? It's about what kind of dreams, hopes do you have in your life? What would you like to do? Why is education part of that? Because the reality is, a formal 4-year education and sometimes a formal 2-year education isn't necessary to be fulfilled and to have a career that makes sense for you. And so that's really kind of how we got to understanding that people really do want to just find a pathway to success in their life. And sometimes an 8-week course or 12-week course can help move them to that place. But then when we begin to talk about trauma-informed practices, I would suggest this. When we started the interview, I said, I think my life was a lot different than others. I would amend that statement to say I think my life experience was a lot different than what we see life being portrayed as. When we began delving into trauma-informed practices, there's a seminal research on ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and found that like the vast majority of folks who were interviewed experienced at least like 70-some% experienced at least one adverse childhood experience or trauma. Multiple folks had 3, and several had 5 or more. And the people that they surveyed were what we consider, the idyllic suburban, 2 parents, 2 job, live in the suburbs kind of families. And when you begin to look at populations that have been historically marginalized, have historically had less access to resources, to success, as you would expect, those numbers are even larger. And so what we began to realize is that if we don't address some of those issues, if we don't allow, to use your term, people to begin to heal, they're not going to have that same balance in their personal life that will mitigate or limit their ability to be successful in a chosen career or a chosen field of study.
Yeah, I think the healing creates sustainability for the success because, we have to approach all of those places if you're wanting sustainability in what they're seeking and what they're going after. Yeah. Because I think it was, sorry to piggyback what you were just saying, because I love how you said that you're going to amend that a bit, because the more you talk and the more you realize everybody has experienced trauma on some sort of scale in some sort of way with some sort of thing. All the situations might be different on a lot of different levels. But I think it was Dr. Bruce Perry. He had talked about the difference between a big T trauma as opposed to little t. Right. Are you familiar with that?
A little bit, yes.
So basically the concept is that, you can think about these big T traumatic events, car wreck, a death, a sickness, a divorce, a betrayal, et cetera, and that does bring trauma and effect. But then you think about the little t's, which are the little consistent things over life that slowly etch through your behavior, your defense mechanisms, how you approach people, your connection, all sorts of things like that. Right. And he was talking about how we can tend to compare a lot of trauma. There's like this comparison within suffering that begins to happen. But whenever you look at it, living with a bunch of little t's and big T has the same, if not more, effect sometimes within a human being.
I would agree. And trauma is idiosyncratic, right? I mean, what I experienced in my growing years that was traumatic to me, you might say, well, that wasn't a big issue, but it just, you can't compare it. And even if it's a lot of little T's, as you said, like whether you're a person of color and you can feel the stare of eyes upon you when you go into a room, or when you are not included in, or you're the last one picked in the volleyball match, or whatever those kind of things are, those do build up and they continue into adulthood. I think we used to, as a society, say, hey, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, don't worry about that, get over it, you're an adult now, all those kind of things. And the reality about trauma is it exists in your body. It's not something that you can really just get rid of. You can develop abilities to re-regulate, to find yourself back out of that traumatic experience. And those are the kind of things that we provide through Enrich, is helping folks to understand trauma they have in their life. And oftentimes in Enrich, we will trigger individuals so that we can help them to re-regulate. Because I think you said it best, so I won't try to repeat it. Most adults have experienced trauma in their life. Some would probably say, oh yeah, I've dealt with that. I don't know if that's always true because sometimes they don't deal with it in the best way. But if nothing else, what I've learned is we should have empathy for folks because we don't know what trials they've lived through, what trauma they experienced, and how that is shaping their life today.
Oh, yeah. I remember reading a book a while back. I want to say it was by Dr. Brené Brown. She was breaking down vulnerability and shame and compassion and different things. And she had a definition of compassion that I have to say ruined me in the best way, but just ruined me. But she said that compassion was truly only an emotion that can be shared by equals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense, right?
I sat with that and I cried for like 20 minutes of thinking how many times I thought I was compassionate, but I didn't see myself as an equal.
Yeah.
Right? Because we can kind of marginalize their bad decisions, their choice here. Right. I wouldn't do that. I have the right answer and I can help you. It's the right thing to do, but not through a lens of true compassion. Like I've been there, or that could be me.
Yeah.
And we're on the same level here because we're human,
Or I may never have been there, but I've been in a place similar to that. Because to me, I love that. But to me, that used to be the differentiation for me between empathy and sympathy, right?
Oh,
because sympathy is, oh, poor you. And empathy is like, I get you. Because, I may not have felt that, but I feel it. Because, and I may not be where you're at today, but I've been there. And I never forget where I've been, because those are the things that help each of us to heal. And I think, that healing isn't like a space and time. It is a perpetual, continual growing of health, whether that is spiritual, physical, emotional, because I think both time and experience help us to be better about those things that confound us or that trigger us. And as we gain those, whether through experience or education, we really do owe not only others or society, but we owe it to ourselves to give those gifts back to folks so that they can continue to grow as well.
So what have you seen within Richland and within Decatur with you guys integrating some of these practices and kind of pivoting, I would say, on your typical higher education approach?
Yeah, well, I think the pivot is important. We determined, or maybe I determined, some time ago that we have to adjust and we have to be able to see and maybe even expect these changes in whether it's culture or society or our sectors of education, work, and so forth, and be able to pivot to provide opportunities for success. I think I don't think, I shouldn't qualify that. When I first came, we didn't serve, we served the primary majority populations. And we probably did a decent job of that, but we didn't do a very good job of reaching out to, historically underrepresented groups. We didn't do a good job of looking at minoritized populations and providing opportunities and allowing the college to be a place of belonging, a place, because frankly, when I came here, I don't think there was a lot of desire to serve those marginalized populations from the college generally, and there wasn't a lot of desire for said populations to come to the institution because there wasn't a place of belonging for them. there was an understanding that it's not a place that you're welcomed at. And that's probably one of the things that motivated me. I spent way too many moments in my life feeling like I didn't belong or I wasn't welcomed, and you know what that feels like if you've been in that place. And I don't care who they are. You don't want anyone else to have to feel like no one wants me here or I'm not welcomed here. And I think that was one of the essential initial pieces about Enrich that began to permeate the college to say, yeah, you're welcome here. Mm-hmm. And regardless of who you are, we believe you can be successful. Because that historically wasn't always the, if I'm being real honest, that wasn't always the approach of the institution. It's not always been the approach of higher education either.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think it can go back to that holistic approach, because it sounds like not only are you letting them know that they belong, but you're also helping them with the resources and the tools that maybe experience or privilege has not been able to give them, right?
Right.
And so you're also creating a place of belonging, but you're making it easier access for them and providing them with those services that if they were coming into an institution and not feeling that sense of belonging, and there was an expectation that you need to think and act and be like student A,
right,
they're not going to be able to make those jumps and leaps, right?
Yeah, well, I think kind of what you're talking about is what we use in trauma informed practices is the circle of courage. It's a Native American understanding and philosophy. It's handed down by for generations. And really, there are 4 quadrants to the circle of courage: belonging, which we've talked about a lot, independence, mastery, and fourth one, just generosity. Flew out of my head for a moment. Generosity, but we talk a lot about the interplay between independence and belonging, because that's really what you just said. Because if I can't be who I am and be authentic about independence, then I really can't feel a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
So, we've always, I think for a long time, we've said belonging is where it starts. But, in conversations as we try to strengthen, the programs and the philosophy of what we do, the understanding that, if you come in and you can't be who your authentic self is, you really don't have a sense of belonging. So, that is how, one of the ways that we help folks to understand belonging is through allowing them to be independent, and that helps them with mastery of that work. It's interesting because you asked me about what are the outcomes and so forth, and we have fantastic completion rates, we have fantastic employment rates, and once our graduates are in employment, fantastic retention in employment. But I refrain from quoting those because we realized some time ago that really wasn't what we're about. Initially, Enrich was started because we were trying to respond to industry who said, hey, we need people, we need them right now, can't wait 2 years, and we need people who are reliable, good team worker, team mates, and can stay on the job. And really, if you flip that coin, we're talking about people realizing their best authentic selves. And if they can do those things in their personal life, then they can do those things in their either studies or their professional or vocational life. And so, that's really why we came up with the moniker essential skills and technical skills mean change lives. Because we're a credentialing institution. We award degrees and certificates and diplomas, but we're really about changing lives.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to say that. It's probably maybe antithetical to what some of my colleagues would say, because we have standards and we need to make sure that folks follow them and meet learning outcomes. Really, we're about changing lives. Education should be all along about changing lives. That's why, the community college system was created to provide individuals opportunities to access education beyond the compulsory K through 12. But it's not just so that I can go to college or you can go to college. It's about me realizing a better life for myself than I thought I had before, or that I knew I had within my grasp, but didn't have the resources to do it, or the welcoming environment to be that.
I think that's incredible. I love, I can see just a beautiful through line of your life with grace moments and transformative moments to giving you a sense of love and belonging, and how you've translated that, it sounds like, into education and kind of restructuring how we approach people in these areas. We like to end the show with the same question. I love asking people, but where do you hope to see Decatur in the next 5 to 10 years? What would your vision be for that?
Well, I think that Decatur has every opportunity to be a thriving and leading community in the state. We have both the human resources and human capital. We have, the physical, and we have industry assets. But most importantly, I think what is important for Decatur is that we have individuals here who want to contribute to the success of this community, who want to be part of that, who want to see success at every level, whether it's our K-12 system or our education system or our industry and technology, or just a fantastic place to live. And I really believe that we can get there. I hear a lot of voices about what Decatur's been like in its past and some of the challenges we've had. And all of those things, I'm sure, are true. But none of those histories can or should dictate our future. But in order to realize a different future, one of success, we do have to think differently sometimes, and we have to act differently. And I think, frankly, we have to be bold in doing that. I think, without going into details, we've done some things at Richland that no one would have imagined. And some things that my board probably said, Valdez, what the hell are you thinking? But we have to do things differently. There are too many people out there that want to be a piece of that success, not for themselves, but for the betterment of the community, for the betterment of the world. And we just happen to be at Richland one of the resources to help them get there. And so our job is to do everything we can to help individuals have a sense of belonging, understand that they can not only meet, but exceed what they see as their potential. And that's all part of a successful future for this community.
Well, thank you so much for your time. It has been a pleasure to get to know you, to hear your heart and your story, and I just appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. We are very excited to be partnering with Richland Community College in this season moving forward with Main Points. May we continue to celebrate, educate, and elevate all things Decatur.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I couldn't agree more.